Hello everybody and welcome to this video. In this video we are going to do web programming, and as usual it's based on the syllabus 9626, which is for A-levels information technology. Syllabus 22, 23 and 24. And at the time of making this video it's also valid for the syllabus of 2025, 2026 and 2027. If you're watching this from far in the future, e.g. 2028, it's likely that it will be valid for that too. However, better check just to be on the safe side. So all of these points in the syllabus, I transferred them to this checklist. I also added some prerequisites, which is for HTML, and this is what we should ideally know about HTML before we get started. But if you don't know, don't worry, we'll pick it up quite easily. I've created two PDF documents. On the right hand side we see the reference guide. The reference guide contains chapter by chapter everything we need to know according to the syllabus. On the left hand side I've got a list of 10 exercises. Each exercise corresponds to one of the chapters. You can download these PDFs from the link in the description. So I recommend that you follow along with me through these 10 exercises. And then after that, I recommend try to make sure you're able to do most of them without looking up any answers. You don't have to know the whole thing by heart, but if you can do about at least half of the questions without needing to look something up on the internet or in my reference document or in this video, in that case, you're ready to start practicing past papers. Okay, let's get started with exercise number 1. Here I have my folder with all the resources open, 2 pictures, and my exercises in my reference sheet. And it's on the desktop, Javascript, but you can put it in any folder you want. First thing we're gonna do, right click, new document, text file, create a new text file, and let's rename it and call it exercise1.html. We're gonna open it with a browser like Firefox, and we're also going to open it with an editor. You can open it with a text editor if you prefer, but I prefer to open it with an IDE because it has all sorts of advantages like code completion and pretty printing. Let's start by just making a simple HTML file and testing it. Okay, there we go, it's working. Now let's go back to the exercise and see what we need to do. Create a website with a heading, 2 paragraphs and a picture. So we have a heading and we need 2 paragraphs. And a picture. Very good. Now we need to use JavaScript to set the text of the first paragraph. So let's have a look at the reference document to see how we can set the text. Remember, exercise 1 is linked to the first chapter. We read through this to get a brief explanation, and we see we need ID. We need to give a unique identifier to one of the elements. So we want to set the first paragraph, and we're going to give it a unique identifier. And we want to set the text to hello there. Remember, we need these script tags first. And everything between these scripts will be, well, where we put all the JavaScript we need to put. Okay, P para1 should be changed. The content of the element para1 should be changed. And for that, we're going to use innerHTML and get element by ID. I can copy all this, but I recommend you don't copy it because typing will help you to remember in the long run. So let's see. Document dot get element by ID, open brackets, ID name, which is para1 dot inner HTML. And then we're going to set it equals, what should it be? It should be hello there. Let's test it. It works. So we didn't set the text using HTML, we set the text using JavaScript. That's a pretty good first step. Okay, let's see, what's the next thing? The second paragraph should be lorem ipsum blah blah blah. Okay, let's just Control C this and Control V it. Remember, if you don't think you're gonna remember, just type the whole thing out. That will help you to remember next time. And one advantage of using Visual Studio is that we don't have to remember that much. We just have to remember document, and then we use dot, and we just have to remember get or something, G-E-T. And then here we have the auto completion, so we don't really need to remember. Okay, lorem ipsum blah blah blah. Oops. There's something went wrong with the, I probably need to remove this extra line space. Okay. Let's test it. And let's do the very same thing with the image. But now we're not going to use innerHTML. For an image, we have to use something else. Let's have a look at the reference document. For an image, we need to do src. Let's see if we spelled that correctly. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, next part of the exercise. Set the color of the second paragraph to red. We need to do style, background color, red. Document dot get element by ID para2 dot style dot, and now if we don't remember how to do it, we can just search through all of these auto-completion options until we find the one we need. Background color equals red. This will probably work. Let's test it to just make sure. Yeah, it works. Great. And we want to set the width of the picture to 400. 400 pixels, I assume. Let's see. Yeah, it works. Perfect. And that's all for. Let's go see what we've covered in the checklist. We've covered about HTML, headings, paragraphs, image, styles, color, font. We didn't really talk about font and border style, but anyway, it's fine. Okay, we talked about changing HTML using innerHTML, src, source data, and styles. Okay, exercise 2. Create a website with a paragraph. Use JavaScript to create a variable named name and a variable named score. Set the value of the name to Johnny and set the score to 10. And then we're going to set the text to say, hello, name, your score is score. Oh. Just one small typo messes up my whole thing. Okay, it's working so far. Let's start. Let's have a look at the reference document. Variables contain data. Data can be text numbers, so Boolean. And we use let. In fact, we can also use var if we want. I've noticed that some of the past papers use var. So let and var, essentially the same thing. It just means declare a new variable. Var name, and I'm gonna give the variable a value to straight away, like this. What was it supposed to be? Johnny. Excuse me. And I also want to give it a score. I can do it like this, a score, and then later add the value later. I can leave the variable empty if I want and give it a value later, like so. We want to set the value of the paragraph to be equal to hello, Johnny. Let's see if this works. Yeah, it works. Oh, but I made a typo. But that doesn't really matter, does it? Plus your score is, So this is how we join text together. We just use the plus and then the score. Perfect, it works. That's awesome. Now let's go to the checklist. And let's see, we learned about string. We learned about some simple string manipulations, but not too many. We just learned about how to add two strings one after the other using the plus. We also learned about numbers, but we didn't calculate with it. So we're going to come back for that later. Next, we're going to learn about condition. Okay, to save time, I've already set up a very simple website which actually just has an empty paragraph and an empty script block. Let's see the exercise. So first of all, we need to create an alert dialog, which we actually haven't learned yet, but it's a very simple function. Alert. Hello there. So now I refresh and I immediately get an alert that says, hello there. Okay, let's put this to good use. We're going to create a new variable. We're going to give it a dummy value 10. And now we're going to set up our if condition. How do we use an if condition? Here we have the conditions chapter. We use if, open brackets, and then the condition. Then we have else if, which includes a second condition. And then we have as many else ifs as we need. And for all remaining conditions, we have a final else. So let's see, what did we say? If age is smaller than 18. In that case, we want to do something. What do we want here? We want curly brackets. And everything between the curly brackets will happen So if the age is less than 18, this alert should pop up. Let's give it a try. Yep. And if it's more than 18, it should not pop up. So let's give that a try too. Yep, it works. So we wanted a second condition. Else if age is equal to 18. Curly brackets. Alert, you are exactly 18. Okay, that does not work. The age is 19, so it's supposed to do nothing. Let's see. This double equal signs means equals. And we used only a single equal signs over here. Now let's try it out. Okay, nothing happens. But if it's exactly 18, it should work. Right. Else if age is larger than 35, we say Hello, madams. Hello, sir. And in all other cases, we say hello. So let's see. Yep. It works. So that covers if and else if and else. Okay, exercise 4 is all about functions, and as usual we can find in this chapter a summary of how to use functions. The JavaScript inside a function only runs when we explicitly call it. So far everything which we've run has run automatically, but when you define a function, the code inside the function only runs if it gets called. So here in this example we have a paragraph with an ID demo. The function has 2 inputs and 1 output, and the output is the 2 inputs when they're multiplied by together, the product of the 2 inputs. So here we're calling the function. We have a new variable called answer, and we immediately give the answer variable the value which is the output of this function, and then we output it in the paragraph. So the main things to remember is the keyword function to say I'm about to start the function, and then we have the function identifier, also known as the name of the function, and then the inputs of the function, then curly brackets. Then we have our code, and once we've done with our code we can return a value using the return keyword. So let's have a quick look. We need to create 2 functions, one named average and the other named sum. It has 3 parameters as input, and the average function also has 3 parameters as input. And then we're going to output our results to the 2 paragraphs using the values 5, 6 and 10. So let's get started. We want to use the function keyword to declare that we're going to write a function. The function name will be sum. We have 3 parameters, A, B and C. And then we're going to open the curly brackets, and we're going to create a new variable called sum. Sum equals A plus B plus C, and then we will return sum. Now let's call the function. Let's create a new variable, let output. We define a new variable named output. Output is equal to the sum of 5, 6 and 10. And we're going to put it in paragraph 1. We're going to display it in paragraph 1. So that was document.getElementById, open brackets, close brackets, para1 dot innerHTML excuse me, equals output. Let's see if that works. That works. Okay, let's do with average as well. I'm going to create another function, and this function is called average. We're going to have 3 inputs again. I'm just going to name them something else. In 1, in 2, and in 3. We can give them any names we want, these input variables, so long as we use them consistently. And now we will calculate the average. Let aver equal in 1 plus in 2 plus in 3 divided by 3. And then don't forget to return. So let's do the same thing. We already have a variable named output. So we're just going to give it a new value. We don't have to declare it again because we already declared it up here. We're just changing the value that's stored in this variable. And instead of calculating the sum, we're going to calculate the average. And we're going to use the same values, 5, 6, 10. And then we're going to output it to the second paragraph. And let's make sure this is saved and rerun over here. And we have 7, which sounds about right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's have a look at our checklist. Functions. We learned about parameters. We learned about return value. And what about self-invoked? Here in our reference guide, we talk very quickly about self-invoked. If we want to run a function automatically when a page loads, we can use self-invoking. Basically, it means the function simply calls itself. And all we have to do to use that is put the function between brackets. And it should work. But I cannot really think of a practical application of this, so I'm not going to demonstrate it. Okay, moving on. Things are starting to get really interesting. Now we're talking about events. First of all, let's create a website of a dog with 2 buttons below, and the buttons read cat and dog, and the width of the picture is 300 by 400. I've already done all of that to save some time, and it looks approximately like this. But the buttons don't do anything because I don't have any script yet. So what we want to do is we're going to, when the image loads, an alert should say image loaded successfully. So image, we're going to give it an attribute called onload, and the value of the attribute is going to be the whole function alert. Because it's just a small function, I'm going to write the whole function inside the attribute. Image loaded successfully. And let's refresh, and as we can see, it works. Okay, the next assignment says when the user clicks on the button cat, the image should turn into a cat. So let's create a function first of all, and we'll call it cat button clicked. Let's just use an alert for now, just to test if I am able to call this function. Oh look, I made a mistake. Okay, so we have this cat button, and I want to add an onload. Onload equals not onload, excuse me, on click. So when somebody clicks on the button, what is it going to do? We're going to call this function cat button clicked. I'm going to save it and let's test it to see if it works. So first we get this message, and now when we click on cat, it should call this message. Great. But looking carefully at the assignment, we see that we don't want it to give us a message. We just want it simply to change the image to the image of a cat. So to do that, we just delete this. And instead of that, we say document dot get element by ID. We want the image, and the ID of the image is img. Dot. We want to change this property, the src property. Src is equal to cat dot jpeg. Let's see if it works. Refresh. Ah, very good. In fact, this is starting to annoy me, so I'm gonna remove it for now. So we won't keep having that alert button popping up every time the image reloads. Okay, let's have a look. When the user clicks on the dog button, the image should turn into the image of a dog. To do that, we'll just copy paste and replace dog, and we're gonna go over here and when this dog button is clicked, we say dog button clicked. So in other words, when we click the button which has the text cat, it calls this function. And when we click the button which has the text dog, it calls this function. Very easy, really, if you think about it. Let's test it. Refresh. Cat, dog, cat, dog, cat, dog. Beautiful. Okay, next. When the user hovers with the mouse over the image, increase the width to 400 and the height to 500. We're going to use mouse over. Let's start with a function. Function image hovered curly brackets document dot get element by ID dot image dot width becomes 500 pixels. Let's change it to this, and the height becomes 400 pixels. And we want this to happen whenever we hover over the image with the mouse. So we're gonna go to the image and say on hover. No, on mouse over. On mouse over equals, what do we do when there's a mouse over event? we call the function image hovered, open brackets, close brackets. And let's save it and test it. Well, it's definitely doing something, but it's not really doing what I expected. Hold on, let me pause it and figure out what's going on.
6 hours later.
Okay, there's the problem. The problem is that the JavaScript does not like this text and px. It really needs it to be a number. It does not like thinking in terms of text. So I'm going to remove that. Save, refresh to test, hover over, it becomes larger. Okay, next. Let's go to mouse out. Using mouse out, we put it back to how it was before. So let's copy paste image hover out. And we'll put it back to how it was before, 400 and 300. And let's add another attribute. Right, perfect. Does it matter if it's a cat? No, it works just as well with a cat or a dog. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so that's it for the exercise. Let's go back to our checklist. And let's check some things off. So we did on load, we did on click, we did on mouse over, we did on mouse out. So what's on change? All it is when an element changes. For example, if you have a text box and you change the text inside, the on change event is triggered. Also on key down, if you have an element like, for example, something like a text box, when you can type letters, every time the user presses any of the keys on the keyboard, it triggers the on key down event. So I'm going to mark those complete too. Okay, we're going to move to the next exercise, which is exercise number 6 about outputting data. We start by creating a website with a paragraph and 4 buttons, which I've already created over here, but currently the buttons don't do anything. When the button innerHTML is clicked, then set the text to the paragraph button clicked. So let's do it. First of all, we need to say on click. When somebody clicks this button, something is going to happen. And what's going to happen? Let's let the function decide what's going to happen. And we're going to name that function innerHTML function. We have not yet defined this function. So let's define it. And let's just create a quick alert to test to make sure that our function is working. Save and overwrite and click. Yeah, it's working. This button is linked to this function. Instead of that, we want to set the innerHTML of this paragraph. So this paragraph is going to need an ID. Document dot get element by ID. We're looking for the ID, the element with the ID para. And we're gonna set the inner HTML to, what was it? Button clicked. So this is one way to give feedback to the user by using one of the elements in the HTML code and setting the inner HTML. Let's test it to see if it works. Right, it works. When the alert button is clicked, it calls an alert. We've already seen an alert as well, but why not? Let's go through the motions. An alert is another way to give feedback or information to the user. Alert function. Alert. And the alert should say what? Button clicked. Let's test it. Oh, I didn't link it yet. Oh, looks like I made a mistake here. Ah, there's my mistake. Yeah, it works. Next, console. We can also output information to the console. The console is usually used for debugging. It's not usually used for regular users. But for people like us who are coding in JavaScript, it can be pretty useful. If we want to give some information that's useful for us, but we don't want to bother the regular users with it, would just output it to the console. But where can we find the console? So in your browser, I'm using Firefox, but probably it's the same for your browser. You just press F12 to open up this bar, and this bar shows all sorts of useful stuff. It's a bit different on Chrome, for example, but on Firefox we can click on console, and here we get a whole bunch of messages. So let's write a message to this console. We're gonna make a function console function, and we're gonna say console.log button clicked. And we are going to link that button to the onClick, this function to the onClick of this button. Don't forget the quotation marks. You see, every time I click on this button, I get a message here. I clicked on it 4 times, so I can see that I got the message 4 times. 5, 6. And next, we want to overwrite HTML. We're going to use document.write button clicked. Overwrite click function. Oh, wrong brackets. There they are. Document.write button clicked. This is a weird one. I have no idea why this would ever be useful. But what we do is we're gonna override all this HTML code simply with the text button clicked whenever anybody clicks on this button. So let's link it up quickly. And let's see if it works. Let's close the console by pressing F12 again. Refresh. Right. Let's open the console again and go to the inspector. And we can see that the whole HTML file consists entirely of the text button clicked. Luckily, our original file is still here. And here, if we look at the checklist, this is what we find. Console is actually the same as console.log, which covers all of this subchapter. Okay, exercise number 7. Exercise number 7 is all about getting user input. And we can get a quick overview in the chapter Getting User Input. And basically we learned that the two main things that we're going to learn in this subchapter is confirm and prompt. So let's just get started, shall we? Here we have the HTML code. We have 2 paragraphs and a button. When the user clicks the button, we get a confirm dialog. So the first thing we need to do is we want to link the button to the function. And we've already got a function, and the function should be called clicked. Function clicked. Curly brackets. Okay, our code comes here. Let's just test the function to see if it's working. Yeah, it's working. Okay, instead of just having an alert called test, we want to use a confirm dialog, which means the user can either click on OK or cancel. Okay, let's run it to see if it works. Yep, we can click on OK, nothing happens. Or we can click on cancel and still nothing happens. So in order to find out whether the user clicked OK or cancel, we need another variable. So the answer, we have a variable, and whenever the user clicks, whether he clicks on OK or cancel, it's going to go in the variable called answer. Let's do a quick alert to see what kind of data is in this variable. When we click on OK, we get true. And what happens when we click on cancel? We get false. So this variable can be either true or false. This is called a Boolean. Here, let's hover over this and we see that it's written Boolean. Boolean is another kind of variable. We've learned about string variables, or in other words, text variables. So variables can contain text. And we've also learned about number variables. Variables can also contain numbers as values. But now we're learning about a third kind, which is a Boolean. A Boolean can only contain the values true or false. So let's go to the next part of the exercise. If the user clicks on OK, we get a prompt dialog that says, please enter your greatest fear. So let's do it. If answer equals true, in that case, we get a prompt dialog. Enter your greatest fear. Let's see. Save, refresh, run, click on OK. We get a prompt. I don't know what, spiders. But if we click on cancel, nothing happens. In the next part of the question, it says, next we enter a text to the second paragraph that says, you are attacked by a, plus the text that the user input. So we need to get the element of the second paragraph. Document dot get element by ID. Open brackets, para dot innerHTML equals you were attacked by a save, run, refresh, click. Okay, you were attacked by a what? Whatever the user input here, we need to put here, but we don't know what the user input, so we need to use a variable for that too. So let's see. We're going to create another variable. Greatest fear. And then we'll do it all in one line. Create a new variable called greatest fear and immediately assign it whatever the user writes in the prompt. Now we're gonna add over here greatest fear, save, refresh, run, okay, spiders. You were attacked by spiders. Perfect, it works. So let's go back to our checklist, and here we have that we learn about the confirm, we learn about the prompt, and that covers that. We also learn about Boolean. Boolean is a variable that can be either true or false. We also learned about strings, which are text variables, and we also learned about numbers, which are number variables. We learned about these earlier, but we had a quick revision in this video, so why not check them off now? This covers use variables and constants. Only we didn't quite learn what constants are. It's very easy. Let's go back to our reference document. We go to odds and ends. This is where I have all sorts of stuff that I didn't have in the main part of the document. And have a look at constants. A constant is just like a variable. The only difference is that after getting an initial value, the constants cannot change anymore. And in order to declare a constant, you don't use let or var, but you use const, C-O-N-S-T. And that's all there is to know about constants. Okay, exercise 8. Create a website with a paragraph with the text "This is a secret message," and then include 2 buttons with the text "Show message" and "Hide message." So basically in this exercise we're going to learn about showing and hiding elements, and there's 2 ways: style.display and style.visibility. Here we have the website which I have so far, and as a first thing we're going to hide the secret message. So this paragraph is going to need an ID. And we're going to write code document.getElementById style.visibility equals false. Is that going to work? There's only one way to find out. Let's save it and run. No, it doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to go to the reference document. We need to use the tags hidden and visible. Let's test it again. Right, it's hidden. Now we're going to create a function called show. So now the show button shows it. We're going to create another function called hide, but we're not going to make it visible, we're going to make it hidden again. Show, hide, show, hide. Great. The final part of the exercise is we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to use style.display. And for style.display, we need to use none and inline. None to hide it, inline to make it visible again. So as you can see, both work, but using display, it actually makes the elements which we're hiding have 0 space. While when we're using visibility, it keeps the space it occupied before, the only thing that changes is whether it's hidden or not. But it still takes up the same amount of space that it did before in the website. Okay, next let's have a look at loops. In this chapter we're going to learn about for loops, for in loops, while loops, and do while. So let's have a quick look over here. In fact, actually, let's open the Visual Studio Code next to the reference guide, and let's have a look. For open brackets, let I equals 1. So we have 3 parts to this for loop. First of all, we have the variable I. We declare a new variable, and this one is going to be a variable which changes every time we run the loop. The next thing is we have a condition. The loop should run so long as the condition related to this variable is true. So in other words, we're saying starting with I equals 1 and continuing as long as I is smaller than 11, repeat the loop. And the next is a small expression which is going to tell us how our variable is going to update. I++ just means increment I, or add 1 to I. So I is going to start as 1. It's going to do everything between the curly brackets, and then it's going to add 1 to itself, and then it's going to do everything between the curly brackets, etc., etc., and it's going to keep going and as long as this condition is true. So let's see. Console.log I, and let's see if it works. We'll refresh, and we're gonna open up the console, and here we have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that was the first part. Next, we're going to use a for loop to count down from 10 down to 0. Basically, it's the same thing, but the initial conditions need to change. The initial condition changes. We start with declaring a new variable, and the value is 10. And the exit condition is going to change too. We're going to keep going until as long as I is larger than or equal to 0, we're going to keep going. And how are we going to update it? We're going to update I by subtracting 1 from its value. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Perfect. Next, we're going to talk about for in. JavaScript can create lists. We didn't actually learn about this before, but I'm letting you know now. We can create lists in JavaScript, and these lists are called array. To create a list, we just have to use these square brackets, and anything between these square brackets is an array. So let's start like that. Let my array equal to open square brackets apples, comma, oranges, comma, bananas, comma, grapefruits. Now we want to use a for in loop. For I in my array. This means I have a new variable, and this is basically just going to point at each item in my list, one after the other. First, it's gonna do everything I say for this, let's say var text, and then I will say text equals I. Now text equals I love plus I. So it's going to add whatever in this variable to the text. Let's test it. Oh, excuse me, I forgot to console.log text. So we create a new text variable and we put the text together and we output in the console. Uncaught syntax error. Let's have a quick look at the reference guide to see what mistake I made. I need to put this whole thing in brackets. And I need a let I in. Let I in, and don't forget the brackets. And now hopefully it's gonna work. I love 0, I love 1, I love 2. My array of I love apples, I love oranges, I love bananas, and I love grapefruits. Next, we want to use a while loop. We start with a number 1. How many times do we need to double it until we end up with a number greater than 1000? Use a while loop to find out. A while loop is a bit different from a for loop. A while loop, remember with a for loop, we have a certain number of times when we need to run the for loop, like 10 times, 20 times. The point is we know how many times, or as many times as there are in array, 1, 2, 3, 4. In this case, we know in advance that we need to repeat it 4 times, but sometimes you don't know in advance how many times you want to repeat it. And this is what the while loop is useful for. You start with while, and then the condition, and then everything comes between curly brackets. The condition in which it should run. Let's say let n equal 1. While n is still smaller than 1000, keep repeating the following loop. Console.log n equals n multiplied by 2. So first we output 1 and then we double it, and then we check if we should continue or not. And if we do have to continue, we output 2 and then we double it to get 4, and then we check if we should continue or not. So let's run it. Oh, I forgot to save it. Now let's run it. Okay, 2, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 512. So I doubled it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We doubled it 9 times. And the 10th time we need to double it will be more than 1000. Okay. It's a bit complicated, so we need to practice to get a bit more exercise, to get a bit more insight. So we covered for loops, for in loops, and while loops. So what is a do while loop? Well, a do while loop is exactly the same as a while loop. The only difference is that the condition is at the end of the loop. So here we have an example of the while loop. The condition is at the front, and then it does everything inside the loop as long as this condition is true. While in a do loop, it does the whole loop first once, and then it checks if the condition is true. The condition is at the end, and that's really the only difference between a while loop and a do while loop.
Okay, next have a look at two timer functions. We're gonna look at setInterval and setTimer. Basically, setTimeout calls a function after so many milliseconds, while setInterval calls a function at regular intervals. When it comes to setInterval, we can also use clearInterval to stop calling that function. So let's get started. Declare a new variable named counter. I already set up this website up here to save time. Let's get started. Let counter equal to 0. Create a function named updateCounter, which increases the counter by 1 and sets the inner HTML of the paragraph to the counter value. Counter equals to counter plus 1. Oh, I forgot to give an ID. Fine. Document.get element by ID, open brackets, close brackets, dot inner HTML equals counter. Let's test it. I'm gonna call this function straight away. Yeah, it works. But we don't want to call this function only once. We want to create a function which uses setInterval to call the update function every 1000 milliseconds. And we're going to link this function to the start button. So we've already got an on-click event up here. And when we start, we're going to set an interval. Set interval, open brackets, the name of the function, which is update counter, and the time of the interval, the period of the interval, which is 1000 milliseconds. Let's test it. 1, 2, 3, and it's gonna go like that forever. Either that or until the internet breaks. Or we should create this stop button. To create a stop button, first we need another variable. And we're gonna use that variable to identify the interval. I'm putting it before this function because all the variables that are here before the function can be seen by all the functions.
if I put this variable inside the function, we'd only be able to see it from within the function. And then as soon as the function is over, the JavaScript would just forget it. So we need to make sure that all the functions can see this variable. That's why we put it up here. MyInterval. Oh, excuse me. So we have a variable called MyInterval. And down here we're going to say MyInterval equals. So the contents of this variable remembers everything about this interval. And now we're going to say function stop and we're going to say clear interval. Here we need the ID number of the interval, which is given by this variable. Excuse me. Let's see if it works. Refresh, start, stop. It stopped. Start, it continues. So it remembers. Stop. Okay. Next, we've done this about the clear interval. Next, we want to create a function named the reset counter, which resets the counter. Function reset counter. Counter is reset to 0, and we're also going to say document.getElementById para dot innerHTML equals counter. No, we want to reset it to a dash, like I said so. And we want to link that to this. So we're going to create a new function called reset. And we're going to, just to test if this function is working, we're going to directly call it. But we could have just changed the onClick function over here. But we have to use this function rather, because we're going to use the setTimeout. But for now, before we use the setTimeout, let's just see if it's going to work like this. So in other words, what we have right now is we have this reset button, and when we click on it, it's going to call the reset function. And the reset function is going to open, and the first thing that the reset function is going to do is going to call the reset counter function. Let's see if it works. Start, stop, reset. Yeah, it works. Start, and it starts counting again from 1. What if I press reset before pressing stop? It resets it, but it continues counting. Interesting. Okay, now we didn't just want to reset this function without any delay. We want to practice the setTimeout. So we're going to use the setTimeout to not immediately reset the counter, but first wait for 2000 milliseconds and then reset the counter. And for that, we're just going to say setTimeout, open brackets, reset counter, close brackets, 2000 milliseconds. Save. Let's see if it's working. Start. Stop. Reset means wait 2 seconds, and then after 2 seconds it should be set back to dash 1, 2. Perfect. So that means we've done setTimeout and setInterval. We've done timing events. And that puts us to the end of the exercises. We had 10 exercises, but we still have a couple of open points. So we won't do these. These are more for paper 3. We only do those which are relevant for paper 4. Okay, so let's start at the top. So the first things we have are these 2 prerequisites, which are font and border style, which I just made up. I don't really think, to be honest, that we actually need to know how to use HTML to set the font and border style, now that I have more experience having looked at past papers. But for the sake of completion, let's go through these points. Basically, we can use HTML to set up the font, and both of them are under the style tag. This is one of the really nice things about using Visual Studio Code and other IDEs, is that it kind of fills it out for you. And we can just add font, and now we have a list of things, properties we can choose from. I'm going to pick font family, and here we have a list of pre-installed font families. Let's put it on Verdana and just press tab to fill it out. Another thing which we can do too is set the style equals the border style to solid. Let's save it and let's go back to our website and refresh. In fact, this is a mistake. Let's put these 2 style changes in the same attribute. Save it, refresh. And as you can see, we now have border, and it's in the Verdana font. Let's put some example text here. Okay, we don't really need to know, but now we know. Next, we want to talk about variables. We talked about string and numbers. We did not specifically talk about calculating, but to calculate, it's very easy. Let's have a look at the reference document, and here in odds and ends, we see all the possible functions we can use. We can use plus, minus, multiply, divide, increment by 1. So x plus plus basically means x equals x plus 1, or decrease by 1. Add something to yourself. X plus equals 4 means x equals x plus 4. Subtract from yourself, modulus, and floor. These are basically all the mathematical operators we can be expected to know. And we also have string manipulations which we need to know. Some string manipulations, or in other words text manipulations, include substring, which returns a selection of letters from a text or variable. Replace replaces part of the text. Length returns the length of the text, how many letters and characters are included in the text. Concat adds appends text. It's short for concatenate. So we have text, and on the back of that text we're going to add string 1, and on the back of that we're going to add string 2, etc., etc. Text to uppercase converts everything to uppercase.
to lowercase converts everything to lowercase, and char add finds the nth letter. So for example, if I want the third letter, I just do text.char add and then 3. That is how we do perform string manipulations. To get a proper understanding, it's best to practice around with them. Remember, you can always go to W3 Schools and search for JavaScript string manipulations. JavaScript string methods, and we can try these out ourselves. They give us an example, and we can change the code, modify the code here, and rerun it. Okay, moving on. We have switch. We learned about if, else, but we didn't learn about switch. So what is switch? Switch is basically very similar to the if clause, conditions. To be honest, I never use switch. I can't really think of a situation in which we need to use switch. It can lead to more elegant code, but I don't know why, I just prefer the if and else if. So I don't really recommend that you use switch in case, but if you want to learn about it, you can find everything you need to know over here. Next, we have comments, single line comments and multi-line comments. The comment is just a note to ourselves, and it helps sometimes if we want to explain to other coders what our code is doing. We can use comments to give extra information. But the JavaScript will just ignore any comments. Single line comments are 2 backslashes, while multi-line comments have a \* or *\backslash, and then everything between the comments will be ignored by JavaScript. And finally, what's also on the syllabus is use JavaScript internally and externally. So far we've been using JavaScript internally. In other words, the JavaScript has always been part of the HTML code. Here we have HTML in the beginning and HTML in the end, and it's encompassed in the HTML code. But we can also store this script in an external file and then load the external file. So that means we can make a new JavaScript file and keep all our JavaScript in that file, and we just have to make sure to include only a very brief script tag in our HTML document. So this way we can keep our JavaScript and our HTML separate. Make sure you include a script tag like this with the name of the JavaScript file and an src. And that brings us to the end of the checklist. Thanks for watching. I hope it's helpful for you. I recommend that you're able to do at least half of these exercises without looking up the answer before you start practicing past papers. Okay, good luck on the exam. See you later. Bye for now.